Today's podcast is brought to you by Behind the Tech with Kevin Scott. You can find links in the description of this podcast.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
My phone decided it was going to answer this call.
Well, that's what phones are good for.
I meant this call, the one we're on. And that's what Skype or Teams is good for. Nothing.
Anyways, here we are.
Yep.
Google's adding new features to its maps. Great.
Yeah. None of these are happening like tomorrow, so I wouldn't get off your chair to go run it and install the latest update. But yeah.
I did briefly look at this. So here's one of the things that's a little befuddling, and especially coming from Google, I'm surprised it's not there. So if you buy, what is it? It's like the Volvo XC40 Recharge or whatever it is. It's Volvo's like electric vehicles that they're now selling. Okay. That version of Google Maps has an option that says like the charging route. So you can like pick. So if like I'm driving to your house, I use that setting, and it will say here's the chargers and how to get there. These updates don't have it, but like it already exists inside of Google
somewhere. But I wonder if it's not an exclusive Volvo feature for some number of months or something. Although that seems really short-sighted. But
yeah. So
actually, since you brought this up, my wife and I stopped at a rest area on the way home from DC, I guess. And it's not a rest area, but one of those things like in the middle of the highway where it's got like various restaurants and gas station thing. We saw a little sign that said there was some kind of an EV hookup there, and I never even saw it, but I assume it's whatever. So, but it raised the question in my mind, like the range on electric vehicles now, like yours, is probably pretty good. Like the range, I noticed like the range of my car, which is not a particularly efficient vehicle, is only 365 miles, something like that. It's something like that. It was less than I actually would have thought. Yeah. But anyway, but when you stop to charge an electric vehicle, how long does it take? Like,
So that is a Pandora's box of questions. So to like the first part of that, the range, it depends on how much money you want to spend and which manufacturer. Tesla right now has the range. They have the range value right now. Like my car, brand new, is 326 miles of range on a full charge, but that's EPA. You're not going to get that real world. You're going to get something less than that. You're probably like 290s probably.
Okay. So you would probably, I don't know how you probably are similar to me in this respect. Like if I'm on a road trip or whatever, I would never let the car get below like a quarter of a tank of gas. Like I would, even though there's gas stations everywhere, it just be the compulsive part of my brain. So I assume you've got to figure in your head like 250 or something. But
it's even easier than that. In a Tesla, because they have their supercharger network, all you do is you press the destination and then it tells you where you're stopping. Like it's
okay, interesting. I was going to say literally the next thought in my head was there must be an app in the car that has those locations. Okay, so all right, so you drive from charge point to charge point, right? Which is not much different from driving to gas station, but
this is where it differs.
Right. So what does that look like?
So it's really like a Pandora's box of what are you charging at? Because if you best case scenario going from like 0 to like 80%, which is sort of the sweet spot, because above 80% it takes longer to charge, about 20 minutes, something like that. Okay. But it really depends. For example, in the Tesla world, they have superchargers, but not all superchargers are created equal. Some of them are version 3, which can do up to 1,000 miles in an hour of charging.
Is there a way to say maybe in your app or something,
no.
I only want to go to those places? No.
At least not yet.
So you don't know yet. In other words, you pull in and you're like, oh, good, it's a 30. Whatever,
well, it does tell you. Like, so most of them are 250 miles in an hour. Actually, a little bit higher than that typically. Okay. So, like, it does tell you, but there's no way to say I only want these. And V3s aren't very widespread. They're retrofitting a lot of their stuff because it's in Tesla's benefit to have you there less time for multiple reasons, because then they don't need to build as many. But those chargers that you saw, that's considered, I believe, a V2 level or like classified charging. That's what I have in my garage. Those will do,
because whatever, you're just charging overnight,
right? Those will only do about 30 to 40 miles an hour, depending on which one you're at, and if you have to use an adapter and everything else. But all you do is you just plug it in while you're eating or whatever, and then it charges. Those are not optimal really for road trips and really anyway, because they take too long. But what those are great for are you find a hotel with those.
Yep, and you live it on. Yeah, right.
So
there's probably some benefits to slower charging too, I would imagine. But
yeah, so just like on a cell phone, Tesla doesn't recommend that you use their superchargers all the time, because you're blasting volts through there. So it can hurt the battery if you supposedly do it every single day. But road trips, it doesn't matter.
2 more questions. So for your trip, I guess, in either direction, how many times did you have to stop?
Well, we took my wife's car, so we didn't.
Oh, you didn't even take it? Oh,
No.
Okay. For some reason, I thought you took the... Oh, I see. So, all right, that kind of negates the second one then. I guess this thought occurred to me, like I said, when we stopped at a place that had, a bunch of restaurants, actually. So I was thinking to myself, like, electric car, come to a place like this, you get out, you have a kid, kind of meander around, pick something, eat, take a little while. It's fine. Like sometimes I'll just go and not sometimes, every time, like normally I'll stop at a gas station that's on the way to the gym or something. And I don't do anything else there. I just pump the gas and leave. Yeah. So I'm there for maybe 5 or 7 minutes, whatever it is. So this is more of but if you're on a road trip or whatever, I mean, it's okay to get out. You want to get out of the car and stretch your leg.
Walk around 20. I mean, when we looked, the reason why we took my wife's car was just pure convenience, because
I'm sure the storage space and everything, because you're transporting your family for the.
Well, actually, I think my car is more storage space, to be honest.
Oh, really?
I also didn't want my kid destroying the inside.
I see. Okay.
I mean, my wife's car's not all that old either, but it was just easier because we didn't know. One of the challenges with electric car right now is not getting to your destination. It's charging at your destination. So the superchargers and everything are by the highway, which is fine. Like there's 2 from my house within 10 minutes of either direction. It's perfectly fine. Right. But when you're at a place you have never been, you don't know what the infrastructure is going to be there. And we knew that the house we were going to didn't have charging available to us in the garage.
Normal, unfortunately, at this point. So
yeah, well, I mean, it didn't even have
like a. Would you have an Airbnb or something that has it has one of the what's it called, an EV charger or whatever?
Right.
Then you're like, oh, cool. Like that's actually that would be a benefit of that place. Like that you could just.
Realistically, we could have taken it and been just fine once we got there, but I didn't want to drive it to a place I've never been in a car that is slightly different.
Sure, and then be like, honey, I'll be back in an hour. I got to drive X number of minutes to a truck stop out on the highway and sit in the car while it charges slowly.
Well, as it turns out, there's actually a supercharger, now that I know this, on Hilton Head, but when I looked initially, it didn't say if it was online yet. It said coming soon. And when we got there, I looked at it, I was like, oh, that thing is online. So then it would have been perfectly fine. But that is the biggest unknown in most cases for most people is like, for your example of just going to the gas station, like driving around town, like you would never do that because I plug my car in every single night.
Right, of course. Right.
I go out to my car every day and there's 250 miles.
Now that it's kind of springing into my head, the car, my wife and I talked about this stuff as we walked into the place, and the thing that finally came out of my mouth was, the interesting thing about this is there are 2 huge changes to the user experience, right? Well, no, probably more than 2. I'm sorry, but there are 2 interesting to me changes. One is that you do the charge, the fill up at home, right? Right. We don't have gas pumps in our garages, right? But the other thing is gasoline is a liquid that is transported by boat and truck. And the thing you're charging at or you're filling up at today requires giant trucks to drive up and literally transfer fluid into the ground, and then it transfers out to every vehicle. It's aside from all of the ecological and climate ramifications, it is an incredibly inefficient way to do anything. And obviously when you're on the grid, it's like some people have like a propane delivered to their house, or oil for heating or whatever. It's incredibly inefficient. And once everything is electric, I mean, I suppose Oh, we'll always need gas. I mean,
Yeah, oil's not going away by any means. I mean, you need it for plastics.
Well, I mean, maybe it is actually, but I mean, whatever. But as far as like, like you on a road trip or me in the future on a road trip or something, like if you had an electric car, the situation is very similar, right? You still, drive, stop, whatever. But the whole infrastructure that's required for that is a million times more efficient. I mean, it's,
the thing I haven't understood. For example, there is a supercharger right next to my house at a Target. Yeah. I have gone to that Target more times than I probably ever would have in my entire life because there's a charger there. Now, which brings the question of why aren't some like large companies like Best Buys, for example, or Kroger's, or why aren't these guys just putting these things in? Because I'm going to say something and it's going to sound...
it would be a source of revenue.
Right, that's what
revenue,
I mean. Like,
and then you're like, well, I'm here.
Like, I have to come here for 20 minutes. What am I going to do? I'm going to go into your store and walk around.
Right.
Like,
I'm going to buy something, maybe,
Yeah, you're going to pick up a snack. You're going to do.
Oh, that's a great point, and that really that's a fundamental. If it happens, it should happen. It's just so obvious. A fundamental change in the way that we view that process. Right. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like it's hard for us because we grew up with it. For us to think like before there was a McDonald's or any of these other places, there were the notion at the time in the 1950s was you could get in your car, drive into a place, people bring food out to your car. And it evolved over time where you could drive through a thing and, never even, no one has to come to the car. You just go to the window or whatever. That fundamentally changed food and food delivery, however you want to call it, for, several decades to come. The thing you're describing, I think would have just as big of an impact. I mean, that's how, local places should do this. There should be an EV hookup at every parking spot in a small town, downtown area.
One of my favorite local breweries does. Like they're getting, it's Mad Tree for people who live in Cincinnati. Yeah. They have a big location and they have right dead smack on the front 3 level 2 chargers that you can just pull in, charge up while you're getting a few drinks, and then eating dinner.
Super smart. And there's a nice crossover too. You also, like Apple should do this. You should. Yeah. It should start with the smart crossovers. The types of people who would buy electric vehicles would go to Whole Foods maybe or. Apple stores or whatever it is. I mean, and I don't mean that in a crass way. I mean, there is a crossover there. I mean, this is an audience, right?
The thing is too, is you can charge money for that stuff.
Oh yeah.
For me to fill up my car, first off, the interesting thing is, we did windows and we did some other like efficiency updates when we did the basement, we did the furnace and everything else. So the efficiency updates that we gained are now offset by my car, because it's charged at home. Like our electric bill.
I see. So it's like a net zero difference.
Our electric bill has changed maybe $5 a month since buying that car.
Yeah, nice.
But you think about it. So there are charging networks out there.
But how much? But your gas bill has gone down. Not.
Probably
I was too much gas in it, but I mean, I'm sure it's some $100.
Saving about $100 a month in gas.
Yeah, that's great.
My old car was 16 miles per gallon downhill, and it was premium only. So
yeah, we have we're always hitting the most expensive button on the pump, let me tell you.
Well, if you want another premium experience, you should check out Behind the Tech with Kevin Scott, because listeners of First Ring Daily have likely heard that name, but if you haven't, that's okay. He is the Chief Technology Officer over at Microsoft, and he's got this podcast called Behind the Tech, where he talks to a bunch of cool people. This week, we are highlighting his conversation with Reid Hoffman. You can find the link in the description of this podcast. It is definitely worth a listen, and make sure to add Behind the Tech to your podcast feed, as there is an impressive back catalog that is worth exploring too, even as new episodes continue to drop. Checking out the old stuff is always a good idea. So other things happening, Paul. If you don't feel like spending a whole bunch of money on an EV, you can spend a whole bunch of money on a $500 pair of Bang & Olufsen headset. Having just ridiculed Apple for releasing a $550 pair of headphones, I feel obligated to point out that spending $500 on a pair of headphones for video gaming specifically doesn't necessarily sound like a good idea to me. So here's my only rational thought. And to be clear, I am not buying these because $500 is a lot of money.
$500 is 5 Xbox wireless headsets.
Or a Series X console. It is very expensive.
Yes.
But I think they are betting that there is an overlap between console gamers and people who like high-end audio and people who have additional money to spend. Because if you think about it, I bet that Microsoft went to them and said, look how many people bought the Series Elite 2 controller. And this thing is a premium peripheral. You're not going to sell one of these things to everybody, but we think that there is a market that exists for this. And that's the whole pitch.
You know who else has said that was Harman Kardon when they released their Invoke speaker. You know?
Yeah, that was a... Well, that's because Microsoft went to them and said,
by the way, I'm sure there is. Honestly, the biggest impediment for this product is going to be the lack of availability on the new console. I mean, and hopefully that, changes over time. But yeah, I see things like that and my brain just shuts down. I'm like, I'm not in the market like for a over the head anything anyway, over the ear anything. And yeah, $500. It's like, no, I'm sorry.
But Paul, you could have lambskin wrapped ear cuffs caressing your...
Okay, you just described a pair of ladies' undergarments. I have no idea what you're talking about. That is lambskin. What did you call it?
The lambskin wrapped ear cups. It's got like bamboo textile headband. Like this is...
Yeah.
Like...
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just not.
It's a fancy way to describe a grilled cheese sort of thing, right? Like it's...
Right.
Imported fromage from...
Get the croque madame. Wait, what is this thing? It's a grilled cheese sandwich.
So, anyways, if you've got $500 and you really want a nice headset, I'm sure they sound great. That's about it.
I'm sure they sound great. Although I'll just... Honestly, the other impediment to this is probably that Bang & Olufsen slaps their logo on everything that HP pumps out. And I will say a lot of those laptop type speakers actually sound really good for what they are, but they also don't use them on some, and those sound fine too. And I don't like, I don't know that, I don't know. It's like the Hasselblad thing. You kind of forget this brand exists. You're like, oh, right. Okay.
Right. They sell their own stuff. They don't just mark up other stuff.
Right.
So anyways, I think that about wraps it up for today, folks. Make sure to check out Behind the Tech with Kevin Scott, and we will be back tomorrow.